Right, so today is going to be a Annona heavy day, so I'm going to address something that I said the other day, which I think was a little bit misleading, but not actually wrong. So I mentioned that Annonas are toxic, and when I say toxic, I don't mean they're toxic in a sort of, keep your pets and children away from them. I mean in the sense that you wouldn't make a salad out of them. There are actually, I think, some species of Annona where you can use the young growing tips as a vegetable, raw or cooked possibly, but the reason I say they're toxic is because all plants are inherently toxic to a degree, and all the plants that don't really want to be eaten express that toxicity to try and stop herbivores eating them. And when you're big, like a human is, most of those toxins in small amounts aren't going to have any real effect. But when you're small as an insect, eating any significant amount of a type of leaf you're not used to eating can be fatal. And so because the Annonas are not closely related to a lot of other plants, the toxins they have, they're not more poisonous than other ones, they're just much more distinct. Because the Annonas are less related to a lot of the other fruit trees I've planted than the grass that I'm digging up to plant them is. They are very, very basal flowering plants, so they do have very different chemistry, and that's what I mean when I say they're toxic. They're not, dangerous compared to a lot of the other things that go in the soil. It has rained, so there are going to be quite a few of the Annonas going in today, which we'll actually be covering for 2 days because I yet again managed to miss a day because it was hot and then it was owly. But then first up today we're going to be doing Annona reticulata, which is the smooth custard apple. This is quite a shade-loving one. They are pretty hardy, as with most of the Annonas, but if you were going to plant an open area to try and sort of create a quick shade crop to establish before you planted something like coffee or cocoa or something much more sensitive underneath it, this is not one I would personally go for unless you're in a very wet area, preferably quite lowland, so you don't have such intense sunlight as you have at altitude. So this is going to be going in with a piece of the Dracaena fragrans, which is going to be going in first. This is going to be going on the north because although this is in a shaded spot, it's under acacias and they're very deciduous. Neither of these are winter thorns, so in the driest time of the year they drop all their leaves, and it was a little bit frustrating for some of the things under here. We have lost a couple of things, but hopefully having the Dracaena here will help keep that a bit more stable. We're also going to be putting in a piece of another technically Dracaena. This is the Sansevieria longiflora, and the Sansevieras actually belong in the genus Dracaena. This is a native one. This is actually the stump of the original one, but it's finally got a new growing stem coming out of it, so I'm moving this because there are suckers from the original now in the original spot. And then finally we're going to be putting another piece of the Euphorbia tithymoloides, which should add a little bit of toxicity here, and is also a really nice shade tolerant succulent that should bush out and create a good bit of humidity around the base here. After that we're going to be replacing a lychee, which really suffered when those acacias dropped their leaves, which is in a slightly more exposed location, with another of the Annona reticulatas. This already has companion plants, so it doesn't really need anything else. Third tonight we're going to be putting Annona muricata, which is the soursop, in a place where a Phoenix reclinata, which is the native wild date palm, died. Again, when the deciduous acacias and actually a couple of the guava trees and ipe around this dropped all their leaves in the middle of winter. It was just a bit too much for this, and it clung on for a bit, but now it's finally just given up all its roots. Once the rain hits, some things pick back up, some things just give up finally, and so now we know it's dead. So we're going to be replacing this with Annona muricata, the soursop, which once established is very, very hardy, and if it can go through this rains, it should be pretty much indestructible unless you actually take an axe to it. Fourth tonight we're going to be replacing a tree that's mostly done quite well this year, better than usual years actually, even in quite sunny spots, but this one did get completely toasted when it had a real change of light because it wasn't in quite a sheltered spot, and then the guavas, which aren't usually fully deciduous, when they're young they can be, dropped all their leaves in the heat of the year and just left it completely exposed, and it got toasted. So this was a Suriname cherry, Eugenia uniflora. We're going to be replacing that with Annona squamosa, which is the rough skin custard apple. This is a little bit hardier than the Annona reticulata to sun. It does want water if you want it to hold flowers and hold fruit, but they are, in my experience, just a little bit less tender, which is also why the most exposed location for tonight's planting is another new spot where I'm going to be starting off with one of these sort of dogtail cactuses. I think the proper name will be up on screen. This is one that's actually closely related to things like the dragon fruit. I don't know if the fruit is edible, but I'm hoping it is. I'm going to wait and see if I can get them to fruit here, but I've been really struggling to find anything about these, but they do seem to have taken from cutting, even though it took quite a long time. We're also going to be putting a piece of the Yucca gigantea in here, which should form eventually quite a nice marker and a bit of shade. And then we're going to be putting our actual tree here, which is another of the Annona squamosa, because this is a nice open spot. And finally we're going to be adding to that a plant that is actually toxic in the way that you would keep your children and pets away from it if you think they're likely to chew on it, because this is Agave attenuata, and whereas most agaves, most of it can be eaten, at least with a little bit of processing if you take the thorns off. This one is not one where that is true. It does have some medicinal uses, but as far as I'm aware, the plant itself has no edible uses. I think the flowers may be edible, as is true of a lot of agaves, but I don't know, so don't eat it on my advice. And that should be everything for tonight, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you haven't enjoyed it, thank you for watching anyway. Please tune in again tomorrow, because I will be planting something different. I am not sure what. It might be multiples again, because if the rain keeps up, then it is a good time to do that, but I don't know.